India's founding leaders had varied but complementary visions regarding minorities. Mahatma Gandhi believed that true Swaraj could exist only if minorities felt secure in their faith and culture. He opposed separate electorates but supported social inclusion and respect for every religion. Jawaharlal Nehru viewed minority protection as essential to building a secular and democratic nation. He rejected the politics of isolation and favored equality through citizenship. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar focused on constitutional safeguards, arguing that minority rights were necessary to prevent tyranny of the majority. Maulana Azad, as Congress president, emphasized composite nationalisms where Muslims, Hindus, and others form one nation bound by shared heritage. Sardar Patel saw integration and unity as the best guarantee for security. These leaders collectively shaped India's unique approach: no communal division, but full freedom of belief, culture, and education. Their philosophies laid the foundation for constitutional provisions that balanced diversity with national cohesion. The idea was not to create separate legal systems for minorities, but to ensure their full participation in the common public life of India, maintaining equality as the cornerstone of democracy. The Government of India Act 1935 represented the most extensive constitutional reform before independence. It created provincial autonomy and proposed a federalist structure that influenced India's later constitution. Importantly, it retained and expanded separate electorates for religious communities, including Muslims, Sikhs, Anglo Indians, and Europeans. The Act also provided communal quotas in legislatures and services. These arrangements institutionalized religion as a political category. The Congress Party opposed them, arguing that they deepened divisions, while the Muslim League welcomed them as essential safeguards. Despite its flaws, the Act introduced responsible government and provincial ministries, offering minorities a real political experience for the first time. It also inspired constitutional debate on balancing diversity with representation. The failure of the 1935 framework, especially its communal segmentation, taught the framers that political rights must not rest on identity alone. The Indian constitution later preserved federalism and autonomy but rejected religious electorates. Thus, the 1935 Act served as both a model and a warning, shaping post independence India's determination to unite pluralism with democratic equality through a secular political structure. Muslim reformers and intellectuals in the 19th century and earlier 20th century made important contributions to debate on education, representation, and modernization. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, founder of the Aligarh movement, emphasized a modern scientific education for Muslims after the 1857 revolt. He believed that backwardness could only be overcome through learning and engagement with new knowledge. The Aligarh College later became Aligarh Muslim University, a symbol of intellectual awakening. Thinkers like Muhammad Iqbal promoted self-respect and cultural renewal through spiritual philosophy, while leaders such as Maulana Azad argued that Islam was compatible with Indian secularism. The debate amongst Muslim elites centered on how to preserve religious identity within a modern nation state. These reformers challenged both colonial stereotype and orthodox resistance to change. Their efforts laid the groundwork for minority empowerment within democratic framework. Educational revival, social reform, and cultural pride became recurring themes that influenced later policies on minority education and cultural rights. Hence, Muslim reformers provided both critique and vision, providing that modernization and tradition could coexist within India's pluralist landscape. Before the Constituent Assembly began its formal work, various minority groups presented memoranda outlining their demands. Muslim representatives sought assurance of cultural and religious freedom, while Christians and Sikhs demanded autonomy in education and worship. Anglo-Indians requested reserved representation to safeguard employment opportunities in the civil services. The Indian Christian community asked for equality of treatment in educational institutions. The Advisory Committee on Minorities reviewed all these petitions, balancing them against the larger goal of national integration. It concluded that separate political representation would perpetuate division, but cultural and educational safeguards were essential to maintain confidence. As a result, minorities were guaranteed freedom of religion, establishment of educational institutions, and preservation of language and script. The committee's recommendations shaped Article 25 to 30 of the Constitution. These provisions ensured that the state could not impose uniformity in cultural or religious matters, securing the plural spirit of Indian democracy. Thus, minority submissions directly influenced the design of constitutional protections that continue to define India's inclusive governance model. The Constituent Assembly's final position on minorities represented a delicate compromise between protection and equality. Separate electorates demanded by some groups were firmly rejected as they were seen as inconsistent with national unity. However, the Assembly recognized that cultural and educational autonomy must be guaranteed. The inclusion of Article 29 and 30 gave minorities a constitutional authority to preserve their language, script, and culture. This balance between individual and group rights was a unique innovation. Debates emphasized that minority safeguards should not isolate communities but empower them to contribute equally to public life. Leaders like Ambedkar and Munshi argued that these provisions made equality real, not just formal. The result was a secular and democratic constitution that protected diversity without dividing citizenship. The framers thus turned historical divisions into instruments of harmony. The compromise remains one of India's greatest constitutional achievements, securing minority confidence while ensuring that the foundation of the republic rested on a shared civic identity. After 1947, the new Indian government faced the immediate challenge of rebuilding trust amongst minorities traumatized by partition and also the majority that had somehow lost faith in a particular community because of their demand for a separate state on the basis of religion, and this Islamic nationalism ultimately leading to partition of India and one of the most violent migrations of history. Refugees, settlement, rehabilitation, and communal peace became top priorities. The leaders assured minorities of a full protection under the constitution. Educational institutions run by religious communities were encouraged to continue their work. Policies focused on inclusion, emphasizing secular governance rather than religious identity. The Indian state deliberately avoided any form of majoritarian dominance in administration or education. Nehru's speeches in parliament underscored that India's greatness lay in its pluralism. The government established minority commissions and cultural bodies to promote dialogue. Over time, this inclusive policy transformed the idea of minority rights from temporary reassurance into a permanent constitutional principle. The first decade of independence thus consolidated national unity by turning constitutional promises into public trust. Integration, not isolation, and creating mutual trust amongst all the communities became the guiding idea of India's approach to protection of minority rights as well as nation building approach for India. The long-term legacy of the historical experience, the historical trajectory from pre-colonial coexistence to partition left a lasting legacy on India's national identity. Every phase, ancient tolerance, colonial divisions, nationalist compromise, shaped the modern understanding of minority rights. As said earlier, multiculturalism was not new to India. Maybe West adopted it in 20th century, but India was in practice of multiculturalism, not as an official policy of the government, but as a part and participle of its socio-cultural fabric. The framers learned that living with the diversity or celebrating diversity was a way of Indian life. And it could not be ignored or it could not be forced into uniformity, because Sanatan has always celebrated diversity. It has never believed in homogenization or uniformity. So, following that legacy, the Constitution too absorbed the lesson by institutionalizing pluralism. Indian secularism, federalism, and linguistic reorganization all stem from the desire to accommodate diversity peacefully. Yet, the historical memory of communal violence remains a warning against politicizing religion. Over time, India has demonstrated that minority protection is essential for stability and growth and for long term nation building. The success of democracy depends on the confidence of all the communities in the fairness of institutions. This long historical experience shows that the idea of India has always been inclusive, a federation of cultures united by constitutional morality. The legacy continues to remind policymakers that true unity can only arise from justice, empathy, and respect for every identity within the Republic. To conclude, the history of minorities in India reveals a remarkable journey from coexistence to conflict and finally to constitutional reconciliation. The evolution of the concept from fluid pre colonial diversity to rigid colonial classification and finally to constitutional equality defines the essence of Indian democracy. Each phase contributed to the modern vision of secularism and inclusion. The framers drew lessons from the colonial and communal past to craft safeguards that ensure freedom without fragmentation. Minority rights were not granted as concessions but recognized as inherent to citizenship. This historical understanding remains vital as new challenges emerge in modern India. True justice lies in preserving diversity with equality and unity with empathy. The story of minorities is thus the story of India itself, a continuous struggle to harmonize identity with nationhood. But remembering this history ensures that constitutional promises remain alive in practice, sustaining India's enduring commitment to democracy, fraternity, and human dignity for every citizen. Thank you.